Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, moderator, and good evening to our viewers. Nice to be
Uh,
back.
thank you, sir. Thank you for being back here, week after week after week. Uh,
Mhm.
it's just been great to listen and pick up from your views on a lot of all these international issues that we're seeing out there. Sir, let me start with something from Nigeria today. And that is the news regarding the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. It's the foremost body when it comes to foreign policy in Nigeria in terms of being a think tank. It's turned 60 and it's been celebrated in Nigeria today. What is your view? You were once a director general of that organization. Can you share some of your views on the impact of that organization on foreign policy, not only in Nigeria, but beyond the shores of Nigeria?
Well, you see, the Institute was conceived and formed a year after Nigeria became independent. And one would have thought um, a year after independence, you had this grandiose idea of establishing an Institute of International Affairs. Nigeria founding fathers must be thinking big, thinking global, must be having this expansive vision to have regarded a project such as that as being number one priority for government, even though it was conceived as uh, a private think tank at that time, with the aid and support of government. But then the government took it over fully later on. What people don't seem to realize is that from the beginning, Nigerian foreign policy was a child of the Cold War from the beginning. Um, Before Nigeria even became independent, um, the colonial authority was pushing Nigeria to get involved in the activities and the struggle for Pan-Africanism. It was not done um, for Nigerian interests, although I suppose there are cases where there would then be a mutuality of interests develop. The British aided, and with the support of the Americans, needed an African nation that would be a counterfoil to Nkrumah's radicalism on the African continent. And they thought, well, Nigeria, with its size, its economy, the vibrancy of its unarticulacy of its elite, fitted perfectly the country that will play that role, that in advancing its own vision for Africa, it will be able to checkmate Nkrumah's vision. As soon as Nigeria became independent, even before that independence came on board, the United Nations had already programmed Nigeria to send peacekeeping troops to the Congo at that time. Again, because troops from radical African countries were already in the Congo, and the United Nations under Dag Hammarskjöld again wanted an African state with troops that would be a safe pair of hands, in the Congo. And so you could imagine there was this pressure coming from external sources pushing the federal government of Nigeria to get involved. And so to that extent, I'm then not surprised that when the idea was then mooted that if we are going to be involved in all of these things, we are going to need, a platform or for thinkers, scholars in the field who will help articulate the interests of Nigeria and how these interests could be implemented on the field in support of the activities of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not in contradistinction. No, it also so to that extent, when you now look back, you could understand. While a year from Nigeria's independence, this idea will be mooted to have a Nigerian foreign policy. And so, as you rightly said, the 60 years old this year is being celebrated, and I think it's worthy to be celebrated because there is really now a mutuality in the status of the institute and in the status of Nigeria. Irrespective of the problems that Nigeria has and has had over the years, somehow Nigeria as a regional actor, and through the role it's played regionally in West Africa, in Africa itself, it's become a global actor as well, in the sense that when African views are being sought, if Nigeria decides to advance views, those views are listened to with respect. If Nigeria decides not to put forward views, then Nigeria has itself to blame if it then gets sidelined. But we have seen during the 61 years of Nigerian independence that Nigerian views have not been brushed aside in a cavalier attitude. And the Institute has contributed immensely to the status of Nigeria internationally.
Where do you see that organization being in another 50, 60 years from now?
Well, wherever Nigeria is, that's where the institute will be. Wherever you have had president and government with a focus, determined to pursue with clarity foreign policies. The Institute had been there as an active actor, propounding ideas to nudge government often. And you see, when you have governments willing to be active, that is the best time for the institute, because being an institute of scholars, scholars deal in ideas, and their brains uh, get stimulated by governments who wish to think outside the box. But when you have governments that relax, comfortable within the box, not really interested as such uh, um, in foreign policy activism, then even for its own safety and survival, the institute has to be sensitive to the mood of the government of the day, and kind of knows where the red line is. The institute gets into trouble where the institute crosses the red lines, laid down by government, even when those red lines are not too clear. But I expect the institute to still be there in 50 years' time. It's an institution that has proved itself, and I think any government of the day that wishes to scrap the institute will do so at its own peril. I don't even think they'll do it. They may ignore it, but not scrap it.
Thank you for that, sir. Let's go to Russia. Let's talk about Russia, Ukraine. We've talked about this for a few weeks now, but then we've seen an interesting development where President Biden and Putin have met in a video call to discuss the situation and expectations on both parties. Sir, who would you say left that meeting getting what they demanded? Because some have classed that meeting as not really delivering anything significant. What is your take on the meeting, sir?
Well, I think those who said there were no, uh, to use the language of the media, there were no knockout blows as a result of the video teleconferencing between Putin and Biden. When you have one side that has massed troops and heavy military equipment on one side, and the other side has ruled out military counterfoil. You've broken the first rule of negotiation, which is don't rule anything out. The moment you rule something out as part of the options available to you, you strengthen the other party. And I believe that, and I think I said it about, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, that they are going to be testing Biden. How far is he going to be prepared to go in any foreign policy, in any foreign confrontation? And Biden has now shown that he's not prepared to put American troops, no American boots on the ground in Ukraine. And I think that dealing with somebody like Putin, that should be regarded as a victory for Putin. I wouldn't have advised Biden to be that categorical that an American military response was off the table. I would also have left him guessing, just as he's left them guessing what he intends to do with those troops. Is he going to cross into Ukraine? Is he not? So now it's more a debate even within the United States. And Putin is sitting pretty, enjoying that. So as I said, I think it's a mistake. Nobody does that in diplomatic bargaining. It doesn't mean that Biden will use the troops, no, but he should leave the other side guessing. These things about you will do things that you didn't do in 2014. Basically, you're talking about two things: economic sanctions against maybe even Putin himself and the people who surround him, because the United States still has, well, we could almost say, I mean, I don't want to use the word monopoly, but it still has a preponderance of banking institutions internationally. And number two, you are talking about giving heavy equipment to Ukraine. But you see, equipment are just as good as the people in whose hands those equipments are. And the United States must be aware that that Russia will do anything to get his hands on some of American latest equipment. And therefore, those equipments are either not going to be given to the Ukrainians, or if they are given to the Ukrainians, it will be with American technical support. And that is usually how, the foot gets through the door in terms of American technical support being there, but they won't be called troops. But in fact, they will be troops. And you then expose yourself to being accused of misleading the other party. That if you say you are going to put troops on the ground, I wouldn't have done this. But, I thought you said that we are not going to be troops on the ground. That's why I did it. And before you know it, you then get uncontrollable events happening with uncontrollable consequences.
So the one of the leading military chiefs in the United Kingdom has described this situation as one that could become very deadly. In his words, he said, if a war were to break out, it would be on a scale that has not been seen in Europe since the end of World War II. Sir, if Putin really does go ahead to invade Ukraine, could this be the beginning of World War III?
No, 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 no. I don't think so. Because mutual assured destruction, MAD, is still a syndrome in operation, which is that the United States and Russia could wipe each other off the surface of the earth by using nuclear weapons. And they are not that mad to go that far. Yes, the British defense chief is right to say that, or to speculate that Europe may then face what it has not faced since the end of the Second World War. And it's quite true. The wars that have been fought have been proxy wars in Vietnam, in Syria, in Iraq, and not in Central Europe. So it's not really going to take that much for Europe to then see what it hasn't seen since the end of the Second World War. Of course, you had a problem in the war in Yugoslavia, but then that was really on the periphery of Central Europe. I think the defense chief was talking about Central Europe itself, what it will see. And that's why I said I would have been more comfortable if Biden had not taken the military option off the table. I accept that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. But Ukraine is vital to the United States, and Ukraine is vital to Europe, especially, whether it's a member of NATO or a member of the EU, because you see, if Ukraine falls, how about Lithuania? How about Latvia? There are also all those peripheral countries that were part of the Soviet Union. And frankly, I think Putin's ambition is to recreate the Soviet Union in one form or the other. The dissolution of the Soviet Union is regarded by Putin and people who think like him as one of the biggest tragedies that befell Russia. And if he could put that back together in one form or another, he will be regarded as a hero in Russia, you know.
Sir, there's a point I want to put to you regarding the U.S. and the use of sanctions. Of late, it looks like the U.S. has just been releasing sanction after sanction on different nations, whether it's Uganda or Iran. They've just been releasing sanctions. And I know, sir, that on more than one occasion, and even this evening, you have said that sanctions don't really work. Is the US running out of options on how they deal with all these issues? Because it seems like sanctions is the only thing they're throwing out now.
Well, apart from sanctions having limited utility, especially when there are other options, I'm a bit baffled by imposing sanctions, for example, on Iran when you are negotiating with them. It doesn't make sense to me. Sanctions you should use to punish. And this new love found for sanctions, even the ones imposed by Trump, that I thought the US would have withdrawn as a sign of good faith. Instead, you just added to the sanctions. It's all, I suppose, the Biden administration wants to demonstrate to the world that it has an activist foreign policy. And one of the signs is to throw sanctions right, left, and center. And not to even do that, as I said, don't throw sanctions at the people you are negotiating with. And then number two, there are others who are guilty, other countries which are guilty of the people whom you are. So really, what's the rationale for some of these targets of the sanctions? What's the rationale?
So let's pick on
I'm sorry. Sorry, by the way, let
Go
us
ahead, sir.
this. Is the United States creating problems for itself? It's still behaving as if this is a unipolar war, and it is way big on the block. You've had a problem. Turkey, Russian missiles, and you have threatened it with sanctions. Them going to buy those weapons because there are alternatives. Last week, India and Russia signed this agreement for soft-air missiles. The United States expressed displeasure at it. Now, head of state, and I had to wear to my weapons. Frankly, I wouldn't want to buy it from the United States, where I haven't paid one senator who does not even know where my country is or how to spell my country, raises an objection, and that freezes that equipment, even though I may desperately need it. will go to another country that does not have a system where one person, you know, casts a veto. Even the administration that has a global view of things has approved the system in the United States. And frankly, that system is like an interest, but they don't do this. And they're still continuing with it. And they still expect other countries to listen to them.
So one of the challenges that we have seen coming up, and I think this is something you have spoken about in the past, but someone has asked if you can address this point again. And this is the issue of an alliance between Russia and China and the impact that that will have on the United States. And that some of the things we're seeing from the United States, particularly in terms of all these sanctions, is this now the United States trying to show that they are still relevant when it comes to a lot of these issues going on in the world?
Well, they are picking the wrong, picking the wrong, not only the wrong issues, picking the wrong process to relevance, because to achieve results, whether on or or station talks, or you know, whatever, any of those things, you use them by either uh, then don't call them around the table. It's interest, and when it doesn't, you castigate them and move on. They won't cooperate with you, and so to me, it's the wrong way to prove relevance.
Thank you for that, sir. Let's move on to one of the points that actually I think we talked about it sometime in February. And this was at the time when President Biden had announced that there was going to be a summit for democracy. And we wondered what exactly that summit was going to look like. Now the summit has kicked off. First of all, sir, do you think that summit is going to achieve anything significant in terms of how it helps us to view democracy and democratic processes?
A conference, a conference on democracy is fine. The issue is, how do you define democracy? The issue I have with what the United States is trying to do is democracy according to United States definition. Is it democratic when a electoral college can turn the general results of an election? Is that democratic? democratic, the way people of color are being frozen out, the electoral process of the states in the United. Is that democratic? To look at the people who have to that conference, and you look at some of the people being let out, invited around the table, you will problems justifying who's in and who out. That is where that problem is. Where where how for them to define it. Some of the yes, you're not by any means model democratic. You cannot by any means call the system rush. But to then invite somebody from Hong Kong to come and address that conference, I mean, it is at the time when they were handing Hong Kong over, and sought to call the transfer, coming up this to country laws, which I've never had and I never thought that was going to last. And yet you've now invited somebody from Hong Kong to come and address the conference. So in other words, why are you using that conference on a drug opponent rather than a deliberate genuine to further democracy? That's the problem.
Thank you for that, sir. Sir, I think that someone here is raising a point which I will bring to you, but I think that there was a little bit of fluctuation in the signal level. So I did not hear you properly where you were talking about seeing someone from Hong Kong on the agenda for the summit. Do you mind repeating your point on that, sir?
Yes, I mean, I would, but we are having technical issues. Even some of your words in across to me.
Okay. What I would do then, sir,
What I was saying was, yes.
it's still cutting off. What I will suggest, this point on the Summit for Democracy, I think it's a major one. And maybe what we should do is leave that particular topic till next week so we can deal with it a bit fuller. And by then, some of the additional speakers would have spoken. But I wanted to get your initial views. But because of this technical issue, I wouldn't want to lose that. Yes, I noted someone has just asked me to talk to the technical staff. I will look into that, and we will make sure that we address that issue. One question here that I will put to you, sir. Someone is saying that Taiwan is China and Ukraine is Russia's backyard. Taiwan is China and Ukraine is Russia's backyard. Do you agree with that analysis, sir?
No, no, no. Uh, I, I think we should be careful about comparing orange with apples. Uh, understand what the question means, but I think Ukraine is so central to Europe that even though it was Soviet Union, you couldn't equate it with Taiwan. They, there are no two issues about it. Taiwan is even the Taiwanese themselves, you know, the uh, Chinese Republic or some sort, convoluted theology. Uh, um, and there's no that the government, lost the civil war, mainland China, moved to Taiwan. Whereas yes, long time ago, Ukrainian moved from Kiev to go and form Russia. And so to that, the Russians, Ukrainians, their ancestors is so I won't put it on this same, but put it on the same something as Taiwan. I'm not really sure how much you can, because I can scream freezing.
Yes, sir.
We probably means me at all.
We're hearing you, but it's breaking. The audio quality is it's dropping. There must be some fluctuation on the line. What I will suggest, sir, because these points are very critical and I don't want us to miss them. What I will suggest is this point on Ukraine and Russia, Taiwan, and China. I will want us to readdress those next week, which would then also give us some time to make some further adjustments so that our viewers get the best audio quality possible. So what I would suggest is that for this evening, we'll close the program a little early this evening, and we will pick up again next week and start with the Summit for Democracy. There were a few other points that I wanted us to look into. For example, German Chancellor that's now coming, the impact of that on Europe, UK, and the rest of the world. But I will present these points again next week, sir, if that's okay with you, sir.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
My
All right, sir.
apologies for this is not like us. My
No.
apologies,
Yes, sir.
viewers.
Yes, sir. All right, sir. Thank you very much, Prof.